The Amazing Spider-Man 3 was cancelled, but when it could have been, from the Clone Saga being adapted to Andrew Garfield fighting the Sinister Six. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Well, hello Pokemoners, this is your favorite YouTuber, PewDiePie, and in this video we'll talk about every single piece of information that we have about The Amazing Spider-Man 3. There's some really obscure stuff that goes from the already mentioned to even a movie about Tobey vs Andrew that you definitely don't want to miss. But before that, give me a like, click the subscribe button, leave I love you Andrew Garfield in the comment section, and with that out of the way, let's begin! There's a lot of doubts as to where The Amazing Spider-Man 3 could have led, more so after how confusing The Amazing Spider-Man 2 ended. After the death of Gwen Stacy, Peter retires as Spider-Man for a while, coming back when Rhino terrorizes the city, and here's where the movie ends, setting up the Sinister Six to appear, as well to some other obscure stuff. The actor that plays Captain Stacy, Denis Leary, revealed information about the plans that Mark Webb had for The Amazing Spider-Man 3 regarding his character, and this actually goes pretty dark pretty quick. In The Amazing Spider-Man 3, Peter would have found a formula to bring back dead people, so Gwen Stacy, Uncle Ben, and Captain Stacy will have come back. The love interest of Peter Parker in these movies will have been Mary Jane Watson, played by Shailene Woodley. There's a bunch of deleted scenes of her in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Some of these scenes could have been used again in a possible The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Peter Parker was supposed to attend grief counseling meetings to overcome the pain of Gwen Stacy's death. That's where he would have met Mary Jane Watson. Personally, I don't like the idea of having another love interest in these movies, more so considering that Peter was deeply in love with Gwen Stacy, so it would have felt weird if this happened. Probably that's why Shailene Woodley's MJ was cut from the movie. There's a deleted scene in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 involving Peter's dad, Richard Parker, where it's revealed that somehow he's alive even after the plane crash, and he was supposed to be an important character in The Amazing Spider-Man 3, helping Peter to overcome his pain after the death of Gwen Stacy. This movie was also set to introduce the Sinister Six, with the members being the Green Goblin, Rhino, Kraven, Doc Ock, Vulture, and Mysterio. These last two being villains in the next Spider-Man reboot. But that's not all. The movie was also set to introduce Venom and Carnage, with Venom giving the black suit to Spider-Man. The symbiote maybe was going to be used as part of the plot to resurrect dead people, and Venom was going to start as a friend of Spider-Man, but later a conflict would develop that would turn Venom into a villain, and Spider-Man was going to ask the Sinister Six for help to stop Venom, and at some point, Spider-Man was going to cry because the Sinister Six didn't like his new suit. They really don't learn. In the end, Spider-Man was going to recruit a homeless guy named Cletus Cassidy, give him some of the symbiote, and he will become Carnage. And that's not all. The head of Norman Osborn was severed from his body and kept in a state of cryogenization in Oscorp. The Amazing Spider-Man 3 was also going to have a plot of Norman Osborn becoming the real Green Goblin, exchanging bodies with Harry Osborn. In short, this movie was going to be a mess, because again, they didn't learn from their mistakes, and again they were going to put too much stuff into a single movie. This movie, like The Amazing Spider-Man 2, was set to introduce a bunch of projects that were in development. Some of these actually became a reality later on. But before talking about them, let's talk about the other ideas that they were considering for The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Bear in mind that this is a completely different version of The Amazing Spider-Man 3 than the one I just talked about. There's also rumors that after Peter found a formula to bring back dead people, the villain, the Jackal, will have appeared. Miles Warren, the Jackal's real identity, will have appeared as a teacher of Peter Parker, and at some point help Peter to develop the formula to bring back people from death, and later a conflict between the two will have developed. Maybe, going even further, Miles Warren could have been a teacher in love with Gwen Stacy, like in the comics, this causing conflict between Peter and the Jackal, and at some point, the Jackal will have cloned Peter Parker to fight Spider-Man. According to some rumors and leaks, The Amazing Spider-Man 3 could have been an adaptation of the Clone Saga. Personally, the Clone Saga is not from my favorite Spider-Man comics, but it would have been interesting nevertheless, or at the very least better than the other ideas that they had. But in all seriousness, this sounds kinda messed up. Basically, Peter Parker was unable to grow up and accept loss, and he will play to be God just for it to blow on his face. We could argue that if they cloned Gwen Stacy and the symbiote suit was introduced, Gwen Stacy could have become Carnage like in the Ultimate Comics. Another idea that was in place to be set in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but it was removed in the early stages, was to have the Proto-Goblin in the movie. The thing is that Dr. Rata was supposed to return as the Proto-Goblin. It would have felt weird. But if this happened, there is a small possibility that this idea could have been picked up again for a possible The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Another idea that was said to happen in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was to have Peter's suit look similar to Miles Morales' suit. This thanks to a concept art. This doesn't mean much by itself, but they were considering Miles Morales in the early stages of the movie, so probably Miles Morales could have had a cameo in The Amazing Spider-Man 3. If you go back to early 2014-2015, you'll see that in this time, Miles Morales started to become a popular character, and it was here when projects regarding his character started to reach the surface, so it isn't weird that these were the early seeds that later became into the Spider-Verse. Now that we talk about all the ideas and possibilities that The Amazing Spider-Man 3 could have been, let's talk about the spin-offs and the movie about Tobey vs. Andrew. But before that, leave in the comments if you prefer the first version of the movie or the adaptation of the Clone Saga. Spin-offs. As I previously mentioned, they planned a lot of spin-offs. Some of them actually became a reality. Let's go over the spin-offs that they had planned for this movie. Silver and Black. Felicia Hardy appears in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, played by Felicity Jones. She was set to return in The Amazing Spider-Man 3 as Black Cat, but her participation in that movie was cut because they had plans to make a whole movie about her. The movie having the title Silver and Black. There is not much information known about this movie, other than it was supposed to have a style similar to spy movies. Silver Sable was going to be the main villain, with Black Cat as the protagonist, but that's pretty much all that we know. Venom Carnage. This movie was in the works for a long time. This movie was supposed to happen after The Amazing Spider-Man 3, with the protagonist being Venom and the main villain Carnage. But this is one of those projects that actually happened, even without The Amazing Spider-Man. Agent Venom. A movie about Agent Venom was also in the works. As many of you already know, Agent Venom is Flash Thompson, and the same actor that played Flash Thompson in The Amazing Spider-Man, Chris Silka, was set to return for this movie. We know nothing about this film other than it was planned. Movies about Madame Web and Kraven the Hunter were also set in the works, but as we know, those movies are actually going to happen. Sinister Six. This movie was set to release before The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Then it was set to release after that, but it was eventually cancelled as well. We already know the lineup. It was going to be the Green Goblin, Vulture, Doc Ock, Mysterio, Kraven and Rhino. The last two are going to appear in the next movie, Kraven the Hunter. And with the post-credit scene of Morbius, it kinda scares me that this movie could still be a possibility. Let's hope that the Sony universe of Spider-Man movies with Hot Spider-Man gets cancelled. I don't want to see more Spider-Man movies with Hot Spider-Man. Venom is where I draw the line. Aunt May. Sally Field's Aunt May was set to have her own film, explaining her past, explaining more about Richard Parker's story. Personally, I'm scared about this one, and glad that it was cancelled, because this film was going to be inspired in the comic Trouble, where it's revealed that Aunt May is Peter Parker's mom, because she had an affair with Richard Parker. Kinda glad that they didn't make this one. Remember the Teen Titans Go movie where Robin is sad because movie studios would rather make a movie about Alfred or the Bat-Bell before a movie about Robin? The fact that they considered a movie about Aunt May kinda proves his point. Spider-Man vs. The Amazing Spider-Man. Back in 2014, the Sony leak happened, leaking a bunch of projects that were later revealed and basically spoiling a lot of stuff. One of the projects had the name of Spider-Man vs. The Amazing Spider-Man. The title alone could mean anything, but it makes us think about a movie of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man versus Tobey Maguire's Spidey. This would mean that they were planning a movie about the multiverse all the way back in 2014, even before Tom Holland was Spider-Man in the MCU. This movie could have been like Batman Superman Public Enemies, where the title of the movie makes you think that this movie will be about Superman versus Batman, but it actually is about Superman and Batman fighting Lex Luthor. So probably this movie will have been similar, with Tobey and Andrew fighting against the Green Goblin, or other multiversal villain like Mysterio, The Spot, or Morlun. This doesn't sound impossible to believe, because the multiverse is not a new concept for Spider-Man, it's actually kinda old, beginning with Spider-Man the animated series all the way in the 90s, then again in the video game Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. And in 2014, we had the first Spider-Verse crossover in the comics, so it kinda makes sense that they were planning a movie about Spider-Man in the multiverse this early. This could also be the first seeds of Into the Spider-Verse and Spider-Man No Way Home. And lastly, why? Why was The Amazing Spider-Man 3 cancelled? Well, Sony was having a press event in Brazil in 2014, where they were going to announce all the projects previously mentioned, along with Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, announcing him as the new face of Sony. But Andrew Garfield called in sick, so he didn't show up, and the executives at Sony ended up firing Andrew. I think that this is only half truth, because you only need to look at how much money the Marvel Cinematic Universe was making with each movie at that time, so they couldn't resist making a deal and end up making almost 10 times what the Amazing Spider-Man movies made. I believe that this was the real reason, and Andrew Garfield not attending their event was just an excuse, a facade if you will. because I assure you that if The Amazing Spider-Man 2 made the kind of money that the MCU was making, they wouldn't have cared less about Andrew Garfield not attending. Honestly, I feel bad for Andrew. He's genuinely my favorite Spider-Man. It's Sony's fault for not exploiting his amazing acting abilities. Andrew Garfield could have given a mediocre acting in No Way Home, just for a quick paycheck and call it a day, but you can feel his passion and love for the character. On one hand, I'm glad that Sony cancelled most of their projects, because they were truly mediocre and just cash grabs to make quick money. You can see that by how most of the recent projects of Spider-Man without Spider-Man are received. On the other hand, I feel like I was robbed from seeing Andrew Garfield truly shine as a Spider-Man, and with No Way Home, I have a lot of doubts, more than ever. He mentions that he stopped pulling his punches, implying that he might have killed some bad guys. But how many did he kill? Was it because of the black suit? Which villains did he fight? Now that there's a small chance of The Amazing Spider-Man 3 actually happening, I hope that they address these doubts and Andrew Garfield finally gets his chance to shine. But well, that's just my opinion. Leave yours in the comment section, and with that out of the way, I'll see you the next time. Bye bye!